guess it started.
Yeah, yeah, it said
Yeah.
so.
Okay, you heard. I said you heard I exposed you to audio. I don't think it played it on the other person's side. All right. So well, first to explain like what's your name and what do you do for a living?
I'm Andy Bitter. I'm a senior writer at Tech Sideline covering Virginia Tech football.
Mhm. Is this the same career you had pursued initially?
Yes, in a way. I mean, I got into the newspaper industry, being a sports writer when I came out of college, and it's kind of gone through a couple different iterations and different stops. But more or less, this is the job that I set out to do when I went into college.
Okay. How did you find yourself in this current job with Tech Sideline?
Well, it came from some fortuitous timing. I had just gotten laid off at the Athletic. I was covering Virginia Tech for the Athletic. This was 2022, I think it was. No, 2023. So about 3 years ago. I had covered Virginia Tech for 4 years for them, and before that, probably 7 or 8 years for the Roanoke Times. And they were moving in a different direction in terms of what they wanted to cover, not doing team focused stuff anymore, going more national routes. So they laid me off, and including some other writers. And fortunately, I had known Will Stewart, the founder of Tech Sideline, for a while. He had actually tried to hire me before, and it didn't quite work out timing wise. This one did. I needed a job, and he came in with a very strong offer, and his offer was basically, "Hey, just come in here and keep doing what you were doing." So worked out very well. I think I was unemployed for about a month. Took some time to look at my options, and then was right back at it, doing the same thing.
Okay. What does a typical day-to-day activity, but like with Tech Sidelines and your role look for you?
It really varies quite a bit. Probably the most standard my schedule is in the fall, where it'll be a Tuesday press conference for football. Wednesday we'll go to practice. We'll write something off of that. Thursday we'll preview the game with a podcast. Friday preview story or traveling to get to the game where you're going the next day. Saturday cover the game, do everything that's there. That's like a 12, 13 hour process. Sunday follow-ups, game story stuff. I usually do like a five thoughts column the day after, and then Monday we'll do a podcast recapping the game. So it's just sort of this endless cycle that you have in the fall. Right now, yeah, every day is something new. Today I don't really have anything. Actually, I got to write some baseball cards for this other gig that I have with my job. But like Monday, I went to a board of visitors meeting. And then Tuesday, I did a podcast. Wednesday, what did I do Wednesday? I can't remember. But yesterday, I had a couple of radio shows that I did in the morning, then covered practice. So the schedule is not the same. And I think I like that because, if I had to wake up and my schedule was 9 to 5 every day and I'm sitting in a cubicle, I think I would dislike that intently.
Keeps you interested.
Yeah, yeah.
So how did you find your first job to get into the industry? It could be, before college, during college, or after college. Like when did it?
Yeah, well, in college, I had interned at a place called the Janesville Gazette. I was in Wisconsin, and Janesville is about an hour south. So I got an internship over the summer there. It's like a local baseball tabloid section. It's very strange, actually, like coming out with cover stories for a local baseball thing. But then, I graduated in 2001, lived out my lease in Madison, didn't have a job or anything. I actually moved back home for 4 months from, September to January looking for a job, just applying places. And I nearly got a job in Maysville, Kentucky. Then the guy ended up not leaving that position. I all but had it. I went down there and interviewed, and it was more like just hanging out with guys and playing video games all night than anything. So I was going to have that job, and then the guy never left. So the job never came open. And then sort of randomly, I hit on one in Danville, Virginia. Just sent an application, my resume, my clips. They seemed to like it. Went down there and interviewed. That's the first time I'd ever been to Virginia. or ever really been that far south. I mean, I've been to Florida, but like been in that area of the country and got the job, packed up my car with everything I could, and drove down there, 21-hour drive, and that's how it started.
21 hours, that's a long
I
way.
broke it into two. It wasn't one continuous, but yeah, I was a high school writer and copy editor, and occasionally covered ACC stuff.
All right. What would you say is the most like important piece of advice you received while starting out? And from who?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if it was like somebody specifically, but I feel like everybody in the industry tries to tell you, be available. If something needs to be covered, don't be like, I don't want to do that. Like, especially when you're young, look at everything as an opportunity. And if you're at a paper, or I was at the student paper or something like that, and they go, well, we need somebody to cover this, women's soccer game or men's soccer game. And those aren't the glamorous beats, right? I mean, those aren't the ones that everybody wants to cover. But if you say, yeah, I can do that, I can go out and cover that as a start, when they have stuff that is significant, that's okay, now we need somebody to help out with football. Who do you think they're going to think of first? The person that refused to help you out before, the person that's like, yeah, I'll go cover this women's soccer game for you. So I think that was a big thing early on was be available, put yourself out there. The more you do, the more opportunities you have to impress people. And you never know who's reading your stuff. Sometimes somebody might read something that you didn't think uh, anybody would read, and it impresses somebody for some reason. So I think the more opportunities you get to impress people, always take them, even if they don't seem glamorous.
Okay. What are the biggest joys in your profession? Like what makes you the most excited? And then what are the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I still get a kick out of the games, like events, like being in the building and going like, hey, I get to do this for my job, and other people pay money to come do this for fun. Um, as much as I hate doing all the other, off-season stuff, and it's college sports and it's NIL and it's talking about all these lawsuits, it's just this never-ending drudgery of stuff in the off-season. Once you get to the season itself and you're in a football stadium and in the press box, you go, all right, this is just a game now. We're not talking about transfers. We're not talking about all this other stuff that goes on. It's just going to be the football game that we get to watch and write about. I think that's the cool part about it. And I get a kick out of football games, basketball games, any kind of game I'm at. I enjoy that kind of stuff. What was the other part of the question? Challenges?
Yeah, like the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I think more and more it's trying to get your voice out there in things. There's so many other people doing the same thing, and a lot of people doing it lazily. Whether they just like, well, I just went to this thing, and then I had AI whip up this whole article for me. It's like, okay, well, you didn't really write it at that point. Or you go to a press conference and you ask all the questions, and then somebody else just publishes it first that was just listening to the whole thing because the team will broadcast or stream the press conference for everybody else to hear. So it's not like it's exclusive or anything like that. So I think trying to do that and still get your voice out there and heard is difficult, especially in a marketplace where there's more and more media that's out there, and they're doing things in all sorts of different ways. And it's Instagram and TikTok, and yeah, I'm not going to do TikTok. I'm too old for that shit. I'm not going to do that. Um, but you have to adapt the way that you write a little bit so you can reach more audiences that are out there. So, I'm on Twitter, that's enough. I don't need to do Instagram and TikTok and that stuff. But I'll podcast, I'll tweet, I put stuff on message boards, and that's stuff in the past I wouldn't do a whole lot, but now I do, now that I work for a fan site. So, it's getting your voice out there, trying to amplify it in a sea of people that are covering this kind of thing.
Okay. So two individual questions I wrote. Have you had a piece that you had like written up or like a story that never came true? Like so you couldn't release it with Virginia Tech?
There's some stories that I've had where the timing has just not worked out. There was the wide receiver, his name was Charlie Meyer. who was like a walk-on wide receiver one year. They really talked him up in the preseason. I had a whole story about how he chose to walk on at Virginia Tech and got a scholarship here rather than go to Navy. He was going to go into Navy because I think his brothers had previously, and there's a military history there. Had it all queued up, did the interviews, ready to run the story, and then like something happened that it got postponed. I'm like, okay, I'll just run it next week. And the guy injures both of his hamstrings later that week, and then like never ends up playing and never ends up contributing. And I'm like, well, I have this whole story ready to go, but there's just like no news peg for it. Like, why would I write this story if this guy's not even playing? And then he ended up not playing and transferring, and I just never wrote the story. So it's not like I had to hold it out because all of a sudden it was no longer true. It's just like a matter of finding a reason to print a story like that. That's only happened like one or two times since I've been here. But mostly when I get the information for a story, I'm going to run
All right. So if you were starting out, what would be like a
it.
target market for a writer? Which is somebody that's starting right now.
Target market in what sense?
Like whether you want to cover, it could be football, basketball, like what like area would you think would be the best?
I think what is the best is whatever you're passionate about. Um, I think it's obvious when people are writing about something they don't care about. And I think readers sense that. And what people want to read now is something that is informed, entertaining writing. And what is going to be the most informed, entertaining thing you write about is something you care about. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out there and do that professionally. If you're I believe you're a Broncos fan.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. Write about the Broncos. If you're passionate about the Broncos, and that doesn't mean you have to be a beat writer out there, but if you follow them and are knowledgeable about them and are entertaining with them, you don't need to be like a professional sports writer to offer content on that. There's all sorts of ways to get your material out there. And if you're good enough and if you're insightful enough, people will like that writing regardless of where it's coming from. So, yeah, I don't know if there's a specific sport because I think people can make any sport work. If you're passionate about soccer, there's people that love soccer about there out there. I'm sure there's a bowling contingent out there in the country that people really like. But if you're good enough, if you're consistent enough, if you're entertaining enough, if you're insightful enough, people will find your reading no matter where it is.
All right, and then we just I have the like why I picked you. So I had a connection, like you were my professor last semester, so I was like, okay. And then I had like Zach Joe Kim from VCU. He's like the time Richmond Times Dispatch worker. And I had interviewed him before, and it was just like the schedules are big, and I was like, I got a teacher who, that man, I learned a lot writing last year or last semester with like writing during the game. That was the first time I ever did that. Like writing
Yeah.
the game is going on, then edit it, and it was hard because I'm a Red Sox fan, and that was game three of the wild card, and we just got shut down by Cam Slitzer the whole game. So
That's
like.
right.
I had to write in a non-bias because it's like I can't hate on the Yankees even though I'm a Red Sox fan. But that was my first time I learned how to do that. How to edit on the deadline. And I thought that was really cool. Um, Also like I mean the students like you're like a superstar to us. Like you go on Twitter. I mean you're like one of the most respected voices. So like other than like I mean you got like Bill Roth. You right there. I mean like
Right.
you're insanely big. So I just thought you would be a good person to interview. Also, like I remember we was in class when the James Franklin news broke. He was
Yeah.
like, keep you tuned in. And like the
Jeez.
first day, nothing happened. And then like we saw you, he was like, okay, some talk is who we can hire. We talked to the class. And then like he was like, let me know midway through the class. News breaks.
It was 4 minutes in. I
Like we
remember
just started
exactly when that happened. I was just like, oh shit. Come
like
on.
he was
Killing me.
yeah, we gotta catch class. I gotta the Mercy Pod. I got on Twitter later. Yeah, man, the news came out during the middle of my class, and I was just
Yep.
like, nah, like that's crazy. Like, you just never know, like when you got to jump on breaking news right there. So,
Yeah, that's
uh,
the business. I hated that it happened when it happened, but looking back, I'm like, kind of glad that the class got to see that. Like that's how it is. That's the business sometimes. You just got to drop what you're doing and go for the news.
Yeah, so yeah, that's why I picked you. Yeah, it's pretty cool, simple. Eight questions.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. And if you need anything else, just let me know. Always glad to do it.
All right.